Tonight, back to basics. The state's curriculum to be overhauled from kindergarten to year 12 with a focus on the fundamentals. Good evening, I'm Juanita Phillips. This is ABC News. Three women to sue former High Court Judge Dyson Heydon over sexual harassment allegations. The staggering rise in global coronavirus cases, 1 million new infections in just 8 days. And Essendon player Conor McKenna tests negative to COVID-19 just days after his positive test rocked the AFL. Less is more. That's the philosophy driving a major overhaul of the state's curriculum. Teaching very young children will go back to the basics with a focus on maths, English and science. And there'll be fewer subjects to choose from for older children too. Here's state political reporter Ashley Raper.
It all starts with sounding out to set up a student for success.
Next word, bed. Fantastic.
Or at least that's the aim as the curriculum is overhauled.
The purpose of this is to improve standards across the board, is to improve core competencies in English, maths and science in particular.
The approach going forward will be back to basics.
I think it is time just to focus on the core subjects.
The fundamentals have been covered fantastically, and I think those extra little bits and pieces keep the guys engaged and wanting to learn, so that's always a good thing.
So how will it work in the classroom? The government wants to declutter the curriculum, meaning there'll be less content to teach. And that's across all years to focus on depth of understanding rather than breadth. Exactly what will be dropped is unclear. What we do know is that from kindergarten to year 2, the focus will be on maths and English above all else. Yes, there'll still be music, art and physical activities, but they're not the priority. The thinking is as well, with a streamlined syllabus, teachers can focus more on individual students so they can advance when they're ready.
Unfortunately, if a student is behind and the curriculum moves on whether they're ready to or not, they may never catch up.
They fail to understand that in a classroom of 30 students, individualised learning will actually require significant additional support and resourcing for the implementation of the curriculum to be successful.
The HSC is set for major changes too. From next year, the number of subjects will be reduced by 20%. There are 270 on offer, and it's unclear which ones will go. But the government has hinted peripheral ones like puppetry, leather making and wearable art will be removed. Why? Because the government says they won't help students after they leave school.
We've already failed a generation of school children because the government's been too slow to act in realising that we're falling behind Estonia and Latvia.
All students will be learning the new curriculum by 2024. Ashley Raper, ABC News.
3 former High Court associates have announced plans to sue former Justice Dyson Heydon for alleged sexual harassment. An internal investigation by the High Court, which upheld complaints from 6 women, has prompted calls for the legal profession to take the issue more seriously. But time limits on lodging civil complaints mean the women are in for a long wait in the courts for a decision. Elizabeth Byrne reports.
They were the best and the brightest, but their brilliant careers were cut short. A statement issued by the High Court revealed an independent investigation found 6 young associates had been sexually harassed by former Justice Dyson Heydon.
My clients will be pursuing compensation both from the Commonwealth and from Dyson Heydon.
The development has prompted calls for Mr Heydon to be stripped of his Order of Australia.
Are Australian honours given to everyone except those who are convicted in court?
There should be a proper process to deal with this. There will be. They're very serious allegations. They're very concerning and very disturbing. And on that basis, I would expect those processes to do their job.
Chief Justice Susan Kiefel has apologised to the women and adopted recommendations including to review induction processes, establish a support person for associates and make clear to associates that their duties do not include an obligation to attend social functions.
I think that the things that she has suggested that the High Court will be doing should be replicated in courts across the country if they're not already.
Adrian Morton says the inquiry result is a wake-up call for the profession, where the result of complaining for young female lawyers can be career-ending. But it's not just junior lawyers. Former ACT Law Society President Nor Bloomer has her own story about allegedly being groped by Dyson Hayden at the University of Canberra Law Ball in 2013. She made a lengthy note at the time and complained to the university, which has confirmed the communication with the ABC. But even she didn't want to press it further.
The reason that these matters weren't aired or haven't been pursued to this point, and that is a visceral fear of Dyson Hayden's power.
The three women taking legal action have now all left the law.
This has been a secret for so long. This has had a huge impact on their lives. There is still sadness amongst my clients about the loss of their careers.
Dyson Hayden's lawyers have told the Sydney Morning Herald he denies any allegation of predatory behaviour, and if he's caused offence, it was unintended, and he apologises. Elizabeth Byrne, ABC News, Canberra.
The Premier is urging New South Wales tourism operators to bar Melbourne holidaymakers due to a surge in COVID-19 cases in Victoria. 17 new cases have been recorded in that state as thousands queued for up to 4 hours in their cars to get tested. Gladys Berejiklian doesn't want local businesses serving or providing accommodation to Melburnians.
I call on all organisations not to interact with citizens from Melbourne at this stage.
The Victorian Premier responded, saying he wasn't interested in having a debate through the media. New South Wales has recorded one new case of COVID-19 in a quarantine hotel. The World Health Organization has urged countries to do more to fight the spread of coronavirus as the global death toll approaches 500,000. The number of cases around the world is now more than 9 million. It took more than 3 months to reach the first million virus infections, but the last million have come in just 8 days.
The greatest threat we face now is not the virus itself. It's the lack of global solidarity and global leadership. We cannot defeat this pandemic with a divided world.
The WHO says there are worrying surges in Latin America, but countries like the US and UK need to take care as they reopen their economies. Europe correspondent Linton Besser reports.
The pain of loss in Brazil. Every day they need more than 1,000 new graves. So many people have died that coffins have to be stacked on top of each other. The shocking figure just released: 54,000 new coronavirus cases in a single day. 1 in 3 people being tested is positive, but there's not a lot of testing, so the number of cases could be far worse. In the US, on the outskirts of Washington, health workers are scrambling to find new beds and are frustrated many people don't believe there's a real threat.
Everybody is out lounging on the beaches and just thinking that it's over, and it's not. Unfortunately, it's those people that will keep this pandemic going.
More Americans have now died from coronavirus than in the First World War. But in New York, until recently a global hotspot, life is starting to return to normal. People are shopping, eating at outdoor cafes and getting their hair done. The concern now is states in the south like Texas, Georgia and Florida. The number of new cases is more than 26,000 a day. India now has Asia's worst outbreak. Almost 500,000 have been infected in this country alone. The healthcare system has been slammed. But in Europe, there are hopes they're through the worst. Spain is opening its borders to get tourism going. And Britain is about to announce major changes. It's hoped cinemas, pubs, museums and hotels will reopen in early July. It's going to be the riskiest move Boris Johnson has made so far in easing Britain out of lockdown. He's also expected to change the social distancing rule from 2 metres to 1 metre, all in a bid to boost economic activity. Linton Besser, ABC News, London.
A Ruby Princess passenger claims that a waitress on the cruise ship sneezed in her face days before she tested positive for coronavirus and ended up in a coma. Anne Kavanagh was celebrating her birthday and 50th wedding anniversary on the voyage in mid-March. She's told the Ruby Princess Inquiry her group had finished dinner one night when the waitress sneezed at their table. Sneezing is not a symptom of COVID-19, but Mrs Kavanagh fell ill within days with stomach cramps and fever.
I'm still not well. I'm still not as I was when I first got on that ship. I certainly would never have got on that ship had I known that we were going to get so sick.
She spent 8 days in an induced coma with coronavirus upon her return and still hasn't fully recovered. New South Wales police tactics used during arrest are again under review tonight. The Police Commissioner is investigating one of his officers who tasered a man several times while he was initially resisting arrest in Sydney's east. Some experts say it was too heavy-handed, given there was no apparent threat of violence against the constable. Crime reporter Mark Reddy has more, and a warning, this story contains some distressing vision.
He was asked 4 times.
Get on the ground with your head down!
After eventually complying and with no apparent threat of violence, this police officer pulls out his taser.
If you move, I will tase you. Get down on the ground now! Get down on the ground! Get down on the ground!
Chris Bradshaw was tasered in the head and on the chest before he was arrested in Sydney's east.
They actually tasered him because he was resisting arrest. He wasn't obeying their command.
I fail to see how there's a threat of physical injury from a fella that's on his knees with his arms outstretched.
Chris Bradshaw and his girlfriend, Sivan Deval, were walking down Oxford Street. When they spotted police, they ran the other way and a chase began. Left behind was a shopping bag full of medication, allegedly stolen.
I think, police will be pretty hard-pressed to actually justify that taser use.
Before joining the force, Constable Beau Lamar used to chase celebrities as a paparazzi, snapping the faces of Lady Gaga and Miley Cyrus. He's been sidelined to office duties pending an internal police investigation.
Obviously, the Police Commissioner will act in accordance with that review.
Chris Bradshaw had no visible signs of injury to his face and was in handcuffs when he appeared on the court screen from his police cell at Surrey Hills. Today, the court heard the 32-year-old is separately facing a series of domestic violence charges and breached an apprehended violence order just by being in the company of his girlfriend yesterday afternoon. Tonight, Sivan Deval remains a wanted woman on several outstanding warrants, including the alleged assault of a police officer.
He's doing okay in the circumstances, but it's very early in the proceedings.
Chris Bradshaw is expected to apply for bail on Friday. Mark Reddy, ABC News, Sydney.
Making the move from a retirement village to aged care can be stressful for many residents. New reforms will be introduced to Parliament later this year, designed to make that transition easier. The government says the key is making sure that people leaving a retirement village get back all the money they're entitled to.
After 50 years of marriage, Catherine and Chris Kewen are enjoying their retirement together. They've lived in a retirement village in Sydney's southwest for 4 years.
It's a very good sense of community. You don't need neighbourhood watch here.
While life here is largely stress-free, they say many residents worry about what will happen if they have to go into aged care.
A couple of people have said to me that we couldn't afford the bond or the deposit to go into an aged care without having to sell their present villa, and that certainly caused quite a bit of angst.
The state government is bringing in new rules to better safeguard people going through that experience. They include a 42-day cap on recurring charges once a resident has moved out. Retirement village operators will have to pay part of the residents' exit entitlements straight to their aged care provider to smooth the transition. And residents will get their exit entitlements after 6 months in the city or 12 months in regional areas if it's found that the operator hasn't tried hard enough to sell their home.
Operators will need to display and show that they have actively listed and marketed the property, and that will go through fair trading.
Chris Kewen says a weight will be lifted once these new protections are in place.
You can get hold of your money, particularly if you're going to move into a aged care facility and you're a bit worried. It's a great load off my mind.
The reforms will go through Parliament later this year. Kathleen Calderwood, ABC News, Sydney.
Still to come this hour, why this recession will hit your retirement plans.
We were looking at retiring probably when I hit 70. Our restaurants became worth nothing.
For a person looking to retire at the moment, you are the person that really is going to feel it the most.
Also, meet one of the people caught up in the nation's latest COVID spike. That's coming up.
A major charity has struck a deal with the New South Wales government to provide more emergency accommodation for people left homeless by the bushfires. Under the deal, there will be about 70 extra demountables provided across the state. The pods have been purchased from the Minderoo Philanthropic Foundation, founded by mining heavyweight Twiggy Forrest. The Salvation Army has put $1.5 million towards the project, matched by the state.
We don't build houses, we don't pour slabs, but we do help individuals impacted by disasters, and so that's led us to this partnership.
Charities have been criticised for the way they've staggered donations. Around $100 million is yet to be spent. It seems that private investors are clamouring to be part of a new green energy industry in the state's central west. The government says it's been overwhelmed by the level of interest. But some farmers in the region are worried that valuable agricultural land could end up as solar and wind farms.
Until recently, the sun was relentless in these parts, as droughts set back farmers years. Now it's hoped they can help to harness its energy and drive growth in this vast region.
3 gigawatts of clean, cheap power, the equivalent of a modern-day power station. Enough to power 1.3 million households in New South Wales.
The New South Wales government has pledged an extra $30 million for the state's first renewable energy zone in the Central West. There are 113 potential investors in new wind and solar projects, creating 9 times more energy than originally planned.
I think it's fantastic news for this region because it can bring massive opportunities for not only landholders but local communities in terms of jobs and skills, and even how we use that renewable energy generation and consume it as a local region.
But other local farmers are urging the government to do their research first.
Solar farms take a lot of area, but they don't require good soil. We believe that farmers who have to feed the world should be left with the best soil to grow the crops on.
We don't want to see renewable energy projects built on prime agricultural land, so we need to get that planning process right.
Despite some community concerns about the expansion of renewables in this region, there are plans to establish 2 other renewable energy zones in New South Wales. One centred on Armidale in the state's north and another around Hay in the state's south.
There's always been this sort of combative approach between landholders and future investment, but we're in a new dawn where we need to diversify our regional economies.
Even if not everyone is on board. Lucy Thackeray, ABC News, Dubbo.
The perception that young people in country areas are all itching for life in the big city is being challenged by a new report. Data from the 5 years up to the last census shows regional areas attracted 65,000 more people from capital cities than it lost to them. Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide all saw net migration to the regions, while the rest of the capital cities gained people. The Gold Coast was the most popular regional area people moved to, with other cities like Newcastle and Greater Geelong also featuring in the top 10. But it's the millennial movers, those between 20 and 35 years old, that towns are most keen to attract. National Regional Correspondent Dominic Schwartz explains.
Mine worker Alan Mann used to touch down at home for only a week at a time.
Dropping him off to the airport up in Townsville when we were doing fly in, fly out, they would be all crying in the back of the car.
So the family traded FIFO work in Queensland for daily mine work near Orange, and are now looking to put down roots in central western New South Wales. At 28 and 29, the couple are millennials, a prized demographic for country towns.
They're younger, they're enthusiastic, they're often in the early stages of family formations. They'll make deep roots in those communities and stay on for a long time.
The report by the Regional Australia Institute found that in the 5 years to 2016, more millennials swapped regional life for capital city living than vice versa, but a bigger number relocated from one region to another.
The largest numbers of millennials were moving to places with good urban and social infrastructure and good career prospects.
Large regional centres like Queensland's Gold Coast were most popular, but smaller mining communities were also attractive, particularly in Western Australia. Sydney was the only capital to shed more millennials to the regions than it gained. History teacher Tom Fennell was one of them.
I just wanted to go to a country town that was big enough that would be able to support everything I needed, and I've found it in Orange. I'm very happy.
Home to 40,000 people, Orange has an airport, a hospital and a university. 3 key draw cards for millennials, the report says. Having bought a home with his fiancée, Tom plans to stick around.
I'll plan to stay here, hopefully my whole life, and never move again.
The lights of regional Australia are bright enough. Dominique Schwartz, ABC News.
Animal rights groups say the illegal trade of endangered and protected songbirds is increasing due to the coronavirus pandemic. Millions of the birds are captured by poachers in the Indonesian wild every year, and they can sell for thousands of dollars. They're entered into high-stakes singing competitions that are growing in popularity since moving online. Indonesia correspondent Anne Barker reports.
This is how poachers steal rare and protected birds in Indonesia. In native forests, they begin by smearing glue along a tree branch. A phone hidden nearby plays a bird call as bait. Soon an unsuspecting bird is trapped and destined for a new life in a cage.
I feel so sad seeing our birds lost every year from smuggling and being unable to do anything.
Most birds stolen from the wild are smuggled to Java, where they're prized not for their feathers but their song. Birds like the murai batu or white-rumped shama are regularly entered in singing competitions. The pandemic has shut down thousands of competitions like this, but it hasn't stopped the illegal trade. The contests have moved online, fueling even higher demand.
The popularity of bird singing competitions has just skyrocketed. And in April, we started seeing the launch of virtual online bird singing competitions.
Animal rights groups want authorities and companies like Facebook to do more to stop the trade, though they say corrupt officials are part of the problem too. Quarantine officials have recently cracked down on bird smugglers and last month intercepted thousands of birds smuggled from Sumatra in buses. 5 people were jailed.
We found nearly 3,000 birds of various types without proper documents. The perpetrators don't care about the size of the cage. They're not fit for the birds.
As restrictions now ease, authorities predict poachers will soon return to the forests. Anne Barker, ABC News.
On to finance now, and the local market was slightly higher today, but AMP soared after getting the green light to sell its life insurance business. Here's Alan Kohler.
AMP announced it was selling out of life insurance in October 2018 for $3.3 billion, later revised down to $3 billion. But the deal's been held up while regulators stroked their chins. In a 3-line announcement today, AMP said all approvals have now been received, and investors suddenly saw the words special dividend float before their eyes, and they drove the share price up nearly 8%, although they won't know for a week or so whether they'll get any of that cash. Apart from that, the share market drifted higher today, with most of the banks down and retailers up quite a lot. And that followed a rise on Wall Street last night and on Asian markets this afternoon. Oil went up and iron ore went down on commodity markets, and the Australian dollar has popped back above 69 US cents. Now, with tonight's graphs, there's good news and bad news. First, the good news. This is a flash output survey from the Commonwealth Bank, which gives an early reading on the economy, and it suggests that it's already growing again, albeit off a lower base. And ANZ Bank's early data from its customer accounts suggests that retail spending has stabilised at a very strong level, well above what it was before the pandemic. The bad news is to do with employment. This chart shows total hours worked per capita, and it's well below what it was in the last two recessions, 1991 and 1982. And finally, here's the consensus forecasts of economists for Australian and global GDP this year. Now, it's currently down to 4.5% contraction in Australia and 3.7% for the world. And in both cases, that's the deepest since the 1930s. And that's finance.
Essendon player Conor McKenna has tested negative to COVID-19, just days after a positive result led to an AFL game being postponed. Reporter Catherine Murphy joins us now from Melbourne. Catherine, what does this mean for Conor McKenna and the AFL competition?
Good evening, Juanita. What a day it's been. Of course, Conor McKenna had 5 negative tests, then an irregular test on Friday, a positive on Saturday. Today he has tested negative. I just spoke to the AFL. They need him to test negative twice consecutively. Then they will consider their plans. Right now it's just too early to tell. They need him to test negative a second time. I also spoke to Conor, who's at home in quarantine. He is a very humorous, easygoing, light-hearted person. He's taking this with a lot of humour, I can tell you. He's taking the laugh or you will cry approach to 2020. He has no idea what it will mean for him, but he's hoping he'll be back playing soon. Great news for him, though, and the AFL.
Catherine Murphy reporting there from Melbourne. A shot worth 2 goals will be introduced in the Super Netball competition, even though a recent fan survey was strongly against the move. Former Australian goal shooter Caitlin Thwaites was among several players to express concern on social media. She said it was terrible the players weren't consulted, but Super Netball refutes this. The rule will be in play for the last 5 minutes of each quarter. Players will be awarded 2 goals if they shoot successfully from a designated zone within the goal circle.
This was as good a time as any to bring it in and to make sure that we were pushing ourselves and pushing our boundaries to create excitement, new fans, evolve the game and ensure that we're securing the growth of the league.
The Super Shot will also be active during the extra time period if the game is tied. On to the weather now. We're on La Nina watch again, Graham.
Yes, and if it does eventuate, that means we could see a substantially wetter and cooler spring than we've experienced in recent years. It also means the chance of a La Nina forming in 2020 is around about a 50% chance. That's roughly double the normal likelihood. La Nina events typically bring above average spring rainfall across New South Wales. To Sydney, and it was a mostly dry day, although there were a few light showers between North Rocks, Seven Hills and also Kings Langley. Our tops range from 15 to 17.6. And showers have been patchy and light and mostly on the slopes and nearby ranges. There were some reports overnight and early today of snow and some slushy hail around parts of the central and northern tablelands. It was much cloudier over the inland compared to the coastal districts, and maximums were generally below average due to cool southerly winds and cloudy conditions. Now, a complex low pressure system will move east in the coming days. That's combining with a high that's building to our west with a cool southerly airflow between the two systems. Any showers will be light and mostly about the southern half of the slopes and coast, as well as the far southern border ranges, but mostly clear the state by around Friday. Now, Hobart is expected to be the wettest of the capitals with the flood watch still in place. A morning shower for Perth and also Adelaide. Now, we will see a few showers about parts of the southeast falling as snow above 1,500 metres. The falls will be light and isolated and daytime temperatures will warm marginally, and we've got fresh southwesterly winds about the southeast. So in the northeast, mostly sunny for the northern rivers and the mid-north coast, but partly cloudy elsewhere, with very isolated afternoon coastal showers about the Hunter. We've also got fresh winds on the offshore waters between Norah Head and Port Macquarie. Mostly cloudy along the tablelands, mostly dry though. We've got the chance of a shower about the higher parts of the Snowies and the southern coastal ranges. We've also got stronger winds on the Eden waters, but they should generally be offshore south of Green Cape. Partly cloudy with some areas of morning fog with a mostly dry day inland. Any showers a little bit more likely about the southern slopes, but they will be isolated and light. We've got moderate to west to southwesterly winds on Sydney waters. Our lows will range from 4 to 10. Our tops should reach about 16 to 18. A partly cloudy but mostly dry day, apart from a low chance of a light shower along the coastal fringe. So we're expecting to see mostly dry conditions right through until the early part of next week. Maximum temperatures and minimum temperatures really only varying by a degree or two day to day, Juanita.
Thanks, Graham. Lee Sales is here now with 7:30.